Du tittar på ett frukostseminarium från ekosystembaserad havsförvaltning. En seminarieserie om hållbar utveckling av vår havsmiljö. Idag ska det handla om Danmark som storsatsar på en ny förvaltningsmodell som bygger på lokalt engagemang. 40-50 miljarder danska kronor används för att köpa upp jordbruksmark som sedan ska omvandlas till natur, skog och våtmarker. Flemming Gertz, en av Danmarks ledande experter på området, presenterar.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I'm really happy to be here. I'm working at Segis, and so Segis is a non-profit company working with environment and the challenges with agriculture in the context of nature, environment, and all the things. We are 500 employees, and my department is working with water, environment, nature, climate. Yeah. So what I will talk my speak is about this huge deal we have made in Denmark, where we are set aside a lot of money and also transitioning our managed our governance system to a more bottom-up approach, and it's quite a journey. So I will take my speak from here. Personally, I have been working with a lot of technical things like wetlands, constructed wetlands, and so on. But the last maybe 10-15 years, I have been working also with governance system, because I think it's so important how we work together. We can develop a lot of technical things, but if we don't know how to work together, it won't help us much. So I think that's really, really important. So what I will talk about is this new parliament decision from 24. Where we come from a very top-down regulation, and then I want to talk about some preconditions for the changes that are happening now, because I'll come more into that, and then I will talk about the new governance structure and these new features in that structure, coastal water boards, and what we call implementing committees. So in 2024, we had this new parliament decision with the key goals for environment, nature, and climate in Denmark. So one of the decisions was to take 400,000 hectare farmland out of production. That's equivalent to 15% of the Danish farmland, to make it into nature, new forests, rewetting, organic soils, wetlands, and so on. And 20% of Denmark to be protected nature. And then a very important thing, and I won't speak that much about it in this speak, because that's a speak for itself, a new nitrogen regulation. So where we actually go to a emission-based regulation instead of an input-based regulation. And this regulation has been many years underway, and it's also very important for the whole setup. I will come back to why it's important, but not into details about it. There's a lot of very, very technical details about how to make this. And then actually they also decided to make the first CO2 tax on agriculture. And that was actually what started the whole decision process. But when they, yeah, and then there is this thing with the governance, with a more local-based approach to land management, and including coastal water boards, and then a lot of money. And from the government and from EU, and then also from private money. You have to look at these two things together. So yeah, so the money is for compensating for all the land. So the government is buying land, and the new regulation and the tax is kind of a pressure. And so the setup is basically just to say, okay, if you stay here, if you want to continue having these organic soils in production, you have to pay a tax. Or if you want to use this much nitrogen, you will get regulated. But instead, if you are taking out these vulnerable soils, organic soils, or soils that are close to rivers for making wetlands, and that makes it possible to make natural hydraulics possible in a river valley, you will be compensated. And if we take all this land out of production, the collective reduction targets will be reduced, so you will not get a hard regulation. So it's kind of a whip and a carrot. That is the whole idea of setting up the system. So also what is the discussion is constantly, how is the balance between these two things? If you are pushing too hard, if the regulation is too hard, the whole thing will explode. And if you don't push, well, maybe it's good just to stay where we are. So and there's some really difficult discussion about that balance all the time. So it's not easy. Okay, so where we come from? So we come from a very top-down regulation, very focused on reducing nitrogen due to the goals in the coastal waters. And in 87, there was this goal to reduce nitrogen with 50% to the coastal waters. And that was, probably all these things, less slurry, and bigger capacity for manure, and green fields, and catch crops, and more catch crops, and so on, so on. Very, very legislative decisions. And we have this very complicated accounts for where does all the nutrients goes, and so on, so on. So what we have seen as a result, we have seen the utilization of nitrogen in animal manure have increased, and then it became less important to use mineral fertilizer. So we have actually in that period reduced the use of mineral fertilizer from, you can see, almost 400 ton per year to around 200. So a reduction in the use of mineral fertilizer with 50%, mainly due to better utilization of animal manure. So that's a big achievement to be more effective on using the manure good. We can see that also what happened with the reduction. The yearly loads of nitrogen to coastal waters were reduced with almost 50% in the same period, maybe with a little lag time. But then you can also see that since around 2010, we haven't really seen any further decrease in nitrogen. So you can say that's 15 years ago, and we have been discussing what to do further. But when you have implemented some measures like catch crops everywhere, green fields everywhere, better use of manure and so on, you can't double up on that. You can't do it again. You have done that. So the discussion have been what to do. And then finally, it was realized by, I think, everyone that it was necessary to simply just take land out of production for further reduction that really matters. And the problem is that how to do that? What kind of system do you need? So, as you can see, we were quite successful with a governance system that reduced with almost 50%. So we kind of built a system that was able to reduce 50%. That was the goal. But there were some side effects with that. So when we look at the kind of a cycle in the Water Frame Directive, you can see you characterize, you set goals, you design something, you implement the plan, and so on. If you do it with top down, you can just do it without building any partnership. You can do it with any trust, and you can just do it with legislation, as we did. And what we have had as side effect of that is a lack of trust, completely no ownership to everything, because it was just legislation. And when you do it hard, when you do a lot of legislation, you will of course also see some confrontation. So that's where we actually ended up with these things: lack of trust, no ownership, and also a lot of really hard discussions and confrontation. And still, the status is not good enough, not as you can see here on all the coastal parts, poor or bad or whatever conditions. So there was calculated some further reduction, and of course we can discuss how good they are, but at least you can see it's some serious reductions in specific areas still. In some areas, the reduction target is up to 80% of the requirement for the agriculture-related emissions. So it's really some really tough reduction targets for some of the vulnerable areas. So a lot of reductions still have to be done. So the thinking was, how do we do that? How do we build a governance system that can solve this new problem with taking land out of production and involve even more, because nothing happened for 15 years. So the preconditions for changes is actually to understand what kind of culture, what is the tradition in a land, and I will try to explain that. So as also in Sweden and in the Nordic countries, we have a very high trust in society between people, meaning that we all come with a rucksack always with trust. And of course, you can break the trust, but we here in the Nordic countries, we always come with a kind of trust, and then we'll see what happens. So we have this, and then we also have this tradition for associations based on engaged and voluntarily work. And there is a saying: when two Danes meet, they shake hands. When three meets, they form an association. And I guess it's the same in in all Nordic countries. We are very like on this. And then also the Danish labor market model was inspiration for. So we have this three-party cooperation, a decentralized wage negotiations model, and a minimal government interventions in. So we actually have no minimum wage in Denmark. So this is our tradition. Strange enough, the whole water environment government system has been completely opposite, the Danish normally way of working together. So when you look at the country's social trust, you can see all the Nordic countries is in the top. So that's something we should build upon. That's a potential for working together. That's something. That's why our societies are so successful in a lot of ways. Economics is successful, and so on. So we have to build on that. And one of the things is that we have all these communities where we meet and where we strengthen our social coherence and so on. And you have the same in Sweden and all the Nordic countries. So these meeting places where we do a lot of social thing actually became important things. I will show that later on. So the mandate for this green corporation, this green three-party corporation, was that the government decided that they will set aside a group of people or these organizations. So the agriculture is facing these problems, and there is the reduction target for greenhouse gases and environment and so on, so on. And it directly says in the mandate that the Green Party Corporation draw for inspiration from the tradition for three-party agreement in the labor market. So what we have done actually is to make a direct line to how we actually work together in other parts of the society and implement that into this framework of environment and agriculture, because that's how we actually are able to work together, because we have this basic trust in the society. So what happened is that in June 24, the Danish government reached a landmark agreement with the key stakeholders, including the agriculture, the Danish Society for Nature Conservation, and the Association of Municipalities, and some unions and industry groups. This agreement also included that we made a completely new ministry for green three-party for the first time in Danish history. So we have actually a minister in front of all this, and departments and so forth. So so here you can see the structure. So we have the minister on top, then we have a political forum where you can see the different parties. So you have the ministers, and you have the local government, and you have the agriculture and the Danish Society for Nature conservation is very, very high ranked in this structure because they are following the whole setup on a high level. And then you go down in the structure and you have some more technical stuff. And then at the very local bottom, you have these new local treparter. In Danish, we kalder dem lokale treparter. So they cover all Denmark. Denmark is put into 23 of these lokale treparter. And then we also have something we call coastal water boards. And I will explain the difference between these bottom-up structures. And here you can actually see it. So on the national level, we have the National River Management Plan. That's the official management plan. We don't have any regional level authorities in Denmark. We have the national level, and then we have the municipalities. It's quite simple, maybe also too simple. But anyways, so we have one national river management plan for the whole Denmark, and then this plan is implemented by these lokale treparter. So all these 23 have to go forward with the plan and say, okay, and that's what they have done. They have made a plan for taking land out of production last year, covering the whole Denmark. But then the Coastal Water Board, altså Kystvandrådet, what they do, they actually advises. They make advices for the next generation of a river management plan based on local input. And that's very important because then the national plan is not only a national plan, it's also a plan with local input. And that's really, really important. And I don't think all in Denmark have realized how important that actually is. Because that means that the plan will get better every time we update it. And it's agreed on the national level to update the national plan every third year. Altså hvert tredje år. Yeah, so that's how it works. So the Coastal Water Board makes advices, and not only for the national plan, they can also make advices for the local, for the lokale treparter. And they have a budget. So they have a national. They have the Coastal Water Boards is not something you have to have. It's something you can apply for if you want a coastal water board. So local partners can, shake hands and say, okay, it makes sense. We make a local partnership, and then they can apply for money to hire in expert to make an analysis for, they can hire in universities or whatever to make some really high level exercises on the catchment or the coastal water or whatever, to give advices and to make really, really good analysis locally based on the local input and what the expert can calculate or whatever. So you can see here kind of a simple structure of the difference. Before we had the former governance structure, we had that on a ministerial level, they made the plan, and then there was a public hearing. And of course, with hearings, yeah, it's not always the best things. It can be difficult to implement these things. And instead, we now have a structure where it's the Coastal Water Board that and the ministry that makes the water plan, and then it's implemented with the local tripartite. Yeah. So much more bottom up, much more local input into the plan. So if we look at this simple figure here again, you can see the local triparty, also the lokale treparter, is basically working with implementing the plan, and the coastal water board is working with all the other stuff here. And why does it make sense? It makes sense because it's much nicer to implement a plan you have made yourself, or at least you have influenced the plan. So we tend to ask for local involvement when we have a plan and we want to implement the plan. And in human nature, it's always like, okay, if somebody comes with a plan, yes, why should we implement that plan? They don't understand the plan, and so on, so on. So the whole idea here is that we build the plan together, and when we have built the plan together, it makes much more sense to implement it together. And I think that's actually where we are in front here with our thinking. It's not really, more bottom up. Yes, they make bottom up a lot of places in England and Ireland and, probably also in Sweden and so on. But what we do here is we try to make the plan together on a local level. So here you can see the 23 implementing committees or also lokale treparter. That's something they have to do. They have to make this plan for taking land out of production, and they actually done it. Some places good plans and some places plans that are more on paper than. But it has been. They are moving forward. It's possible. So these lokale treparter implementation committees, or whatever we should call them, they have representatives from the municipalities, from agriculture, from Danish Nature Conservation, and from the Danish Nature Agency. So relatively few there. It's not broadened up to a lot. And then also the catchment officers, and the municipalities are working very closely together on a technical level. So when it went best, they were locally actually able to involve thousands of farmers. And what they did was that invited farmers into these local meeting places where we play indoor football or indoor handball or whatever, where they are used to come. And then they, as you can see on the photo here, explained them what is this about, and then had a lot of maps, and then they started talking about their farms and talking about their fields and where they actually could see some of the land going into a wetland or whatever. So where the process were best, they were actually able within this year, maybe within a half a year, to make a plan where they involved most of the farmers. In some other areas, they were not able to go that far, and it was not really by involving farmers that much. So we will now see when they have to implement the plan, we will see the difference. And for sure, it would be much easier to implement the plan where they were able already to meet the farmers and have them on board. So here you can see pictures with the minister with the red spot there, celebrating that they have made a new plan for an area and they were able to make a plan for taking land out of production and so on. So it actually was a success everywhere, but that was of course the easy part. It was to make a plan. Now it becomes more, hard work to implement the plan. So that's for the coming years. And then the coastal water boards. What is the coastal water boards actually? So it's a partnership between local stakeholders. They have to stick together and say, okay, we would like to make a partnership. And then they can ask the local municipality if they want to facilitate it, and then they have to do it, and then they can ask for some money. And other stakeholders can be part of that, so they can broaden it up. And then they can have a budget to use of expert, and then they apply the agency for money. And there was actually room for 18 coastal water boards in this round, going from 25 to 27. And there was an application for 17, so all 17 got funded. Yeah. So they can analyze the most important challenges faced in coastal water boards for achieving good ecological status. That can both be in the marine area or in the catchment. So they can carry out local-based analysis and look at new ways, new measures. They can give advice and so on, so on. Yeah. And they can test they can actually get extra funding for testing new methods or new measures. Yeah, so just to come back to this structure. So to give you the overview, so the lokale treparter, the local triparties, the implementing body to the right, down right, is implementing, is working on making wetlands, so on, so on, so on. So they are very productive. And the coastal water boards are making analysis, testing ideas, making a better plan for next generation river management plan, helping, finding new measures, improving. Yes, that was it.
Thank you, Flemming. Very inspiring presentation, and it's interesting when you sit and listen and you start reflecting about similarities and differences between our countries. Because, as you say, we have the similarities, the high trust we have in society among our populations, and. I'm thinking about the situation because we need to work more with the eutrophication also in Sweden and the Baltic Sea. We have seen improvement in the level of nitrogen and phosphorus from 1990 to 2010, but actually also in our region now in the Botnian Bay, we since 2010, we have seen a steady increase again for 15 years. We need to do more. And we have national plans. We in Sweden, we have the regional plans also. And I think perhaps we have a lack of ownership for the implementation, and I think that's really where we need to do more, like you are doing it in Denmark now. And our 3 pilot areas, we are trying to build something like a local partnership, local ownership from the stakeholders. But so it's very inspiring to listen to your presentation here. We will open up now for questions from the audience, and please, if you want to raise a question, please state your name and what organization you represent. So the floor is yours. Who want to go first?
Jag ser att Magnus Eckeskog har handen uppe.
Yeah,
Magnus.
thanks. Yeah, thank you so much, Magnus Eckeskog from Länsstyrelsen Skåne. Thank you so much for a really interesting presentation. I have been following this initiative with great interest since the beginning. And what really sets Denmark aside compared to its neighboring countries, the Nordic countries, but perhaps in all over Europe, are the vast resources that are being set aside for this project. I mean, we're talking billions here. And I'm wondering, in order to do that, you need political willingness. And we see a lack of political willingness in Sweden, I think, to do similar things. How did you achieve this? I mean, there must have been a huge debate or something in order to achieve this. I'm wondering a little bit about, how did this really come about?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, maybe we should use the money instead on a big ship sailing around Greenland. I don't know, but I think there is still, I think there is still, this still is on the agenda, and I don't think, the money will be taken away. So okay, our coastal waters is like very, very in the mind of all Danes. So, I think we have the longest we have to a coastline is like 30 kilometers. It's like all summer houses is along the coastal water. Everybody is, having some activities along the coastal water and so on. That's just because we have so much coastline, and then the coast is very vulnerable. We have had oxygen depletion. That was some that kicked the debate already in the 80s. We had oxygen depletion north of in the Kattegat. Some of it may be due to that we didn't really clean the water from the cities in the 80s or so on. So, but it has been on and off on the agenda. And what can really get the debate on a high level is when we have a large oxygen depletion in the coastal waters. And we had that in 23 and then again in 24. And basically, it comes in autumn, in the Kattegat, in the late summer, and in both years we had a very, very warm September, and then the oxygen depletion just got worse and worse and worse. But the reason, isn't that important. It's important that we have this oxygen depletion, and what can you do about it? So the only thing you can't change, from year to year that the water is getting warmer or so on, but you can change that the nutrients input is getting lower. So that what you can change, and this oxygen depletion is the main driver. And this is headlines and on a ministerial level and so on. So that's what driving the discussion in Denmark concerning water environment.
Just a quick response to that. I mean, everything you're saying, I would say, is pretty much the same in Sweden. I mean, the circumstances, people's relationships to the water and stuff is still amazes me that the politicians decided to set aside such vast resources, because I mean, you can have a great system put in place in order for a top-down approach or whatever. I mean, we have that in Sweden as well, but if you don't have the resources, you're not.
Yes, that's a good question, and we have used 15 years, to come nowhere. And for a lot of us, it has been, known that we need to take land out of production if we really want to get further and, make much more wetlands and restore the river valleys and so on. And we just need a lot of money for that. So it took, really long time to get around that and, to all agree on that's actually the measures we need to do. we can't, we can't do the same things we did in the 90s. So that took a lot of time. And then I think also what is important is that the Danish economic situation is quite good. So we have been, quite willing to use money on all kind of things because that's also an important factor. And then also the importance of setting these organizations together. It was actually based on tax. So the government has promised some very, very high climate targets in the election period, and then they had to come up with tax on agriculture, otherwise they couldn't reach the goals. And it was how to tax the agriculture, and then it ended up with the minister putting down this kind of task force looking with the Danish agriculture and conservation. And then they start to talking about tax, and they find out they had to take out the organic soils, and then okay, we can include everything at the same time. And then these discussions for half a year in that room just finalized. We need to take much more land out of production, and then we can solve nature problems, we can solve nitrogen problems, and we can solve climate problems at the same time. So it was actually not the parliament or the agency that came up with the solutions. It was actually the local municipality, national organization, together with the Agriculture National Union and the National Association for Nature. The discussions around these three came up with the solution, and they said we need money for this.
We have some more questions here in the chat, and I will let Lena Bergström, you have a question regarding the ownership of land, because I think that's important also. Is there a difference between who owns the land in Sweden and Denmark? Is it more privately owned, or what's the situation in Denmark?
Yeah. So it's private owned. So we are talking about voluntary things, and in some areas the farmers are happy to get some not that good soil out of production and actually get paid for, and in other areas it's more difficult, and then there is this pressure board with taxes and with new regulation and so on. So yeah. So yeah, it's a very fine-tuned balance to get all on board on a voluntary basis.
Yeah. Time is running, and I think we shall take the last question here. Eva-Lotta Sundblad, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. I wonder what sort of evaluation process are planned, not only regarding the nutrients and water quality, but on societal things, economic conflicts between sectors and things like that.
Yes, that's a good question. Actually, I'm working a little bit on putting together a international governance project, and where we can evaluate it, the whole what is going on in different countries and also in Denmark. I'm not sure that there is any initiative to look at it, but we have also another project, a big project. I think they will look at it. So there is some project initiatives to look at what is happening on. But yeah, it's on a project level.
Thank you. And again, Flemming, very interesting to hear what's happening in Denmark. And I think it's not only about financial resources. I think you also need this political braveness. I mean, to take a decision to take 15% out of production, it's a brave decision. And in
Yes.
Sweden, we have a high ambition now on increasing food production, increasing export. So it will be quite challenges.
But the thing is here, the decision was not. There is just 1 minute. So the decision was actually made between agriculture and the nature agents or the nature conservation. So it was actually their plan to say, if we do it like this, we can take the vulnerable, the areas out, and if we get paid, that's a model.
Yeah.
And when they introduced the whole model to the parliament, there was actually some in the parliament that say, why should we listen to lobbyists? We want to decide. It's our job to decide. And it took actually several months for the parliament to accept to go with the plan they made. So it's grown locally. It's not brave political that want to force it down. That's the Dutch model, where what you know about the Dutch model, where they have the money and suddenly they had the whole population and the flag was upside down and everything. So you have to grow it to get everybody on board. But of course, in the end, it's a brave decision.
It's still a brave decision to listen to the local people.
But there are so many details in how this is happening, you know.
But again, thank you very much for a very interesting start in the morning, and we had 70 people listening to, so I think it was highly appreciated among the coastlines in Sweden.
Du har tittat på ett frukostseminarium från ekosystembaserad havsförvaltning. Vi ses varje tisdag klockan 8:30 till 9:15. Hoppas att du lyssnar.